It was one of those mornings where even help felt too expensive. Sarah stood at the Café Tilde copyright counter, her fingers trembling as she counted her last few dollars. The morning rush moved around her like a blur of tired faces and hurried footsteps. Her son, Noah, tugged at her sleeve, his small voice barely above a whisper, asking if he could have a muffin. She forced a smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes, and said maybe next time. Ahead of her stood a man in an expensive suit, distracted, looking like someone who didn't belong in this quiet corner cafe. Told the copyright. When the cashier told him his card had been declined, he froze, embarrassment flashing across his face. The people behind him began to sigh impatiently, some even whispering. Without thinking, Sarah reached into her small purse, heart pounding, and said softly, "I'll cover it." The man turned, surprised, almost offended. "You don't even know me," he said, his voice low, uncertain. Sarah smiled, the kind of smile that hides exhaustion but still carries warmth. "Maybe that's why it matters," she replied. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting something she couldn't quite read. He took the coffee, thanked her quietly, and walked out without another word. Sarah paid for her own small cup and left, walking back to her old car parked by the curb. The rain had started to fall, fine and cold, tracing silver lines down the window. Noah chattered about school, about how he wanted to draw airplanes and build rockets, his imagination soaring far beyond the weight of their struggles. Sarah listened, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. Life had been unkind lately, a late rent, long hours at the diner, bills piling up faster than paychecks, but she still believed in small miracles, even if they were just a warm cup of coffee on a cold day. That night, after a double shift, she came home to their tiny rented house. The lights flickered as she entered, the electricity bill half paid. She set her bag down and looked at Noah, asleep on the couch with his schoolbook open, a drawing of a smiling stick figure family clutched in his hand. It made her throat tighten. She picked him up gently, tucking him into bed, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep, promises that one day things would get better, that she'd give him everything he deserved. She turned off the light, stood by the window, and watched the rain slide down the glass, each drop catching the faint glow of the streetlight like tiny tears. The next morning came too early. Her alarm buzzed at 5:30, the same dull tone that had become the rhythm of her life. She dressed quietly, trying not to wake Noah, then poured herself a cup of stale coffee. The world outside was great, but she smiled anyway. Maybe today would be kinder. She didn't know that somewhere across town, a man sat in a high-rise office, holding the memory of her kindness like a weight in his chest. He hadn't been just any man at the Café Tilde copyright. His name was James Carter, CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the city. He'd built an empire but lost himself in the process. Of friends gone, family distant, heart cold. That morning, when his card was declined, it wasn't because he lacked money, it was because he'd cancelled everything after his wife left him, saying she couldn't live with a man who cared more about profits than people. He'd gone to that Café Tilde copyright to see if anyone would show kindness without knowing who he was, without expecting anything in return. And Sir had. He remembered the way she smiled, tired but genuine, the way she said, "Maybe that's why it matters." Those words replayed in his mind all night. They cut deeper than any boardroom insult or public scandal ever had. He'd spent years surrounded by people who smiled for advantage, who helped for recognition. But that woman, with her worn hands and simple grace, had given something priceless, a reminder that decency still existed. He couldn't shake it off. The next morning, as the sun rose over the city, James made the call. He told his assistant to find her. No excuses. When they finally tracked her down to a small rental home on the edge of town, he didn't send a letter or an email. He came himself. And when Sarah heard the thunderous sound of a helicopter landing near her house, she thought it was some mistake, some emergency. She grabbed Noah and ran outside, shielding his eyes from the wind. Then she saw Hima, the man from the Café Tilde copyright, stepping out in a tailored suit, the wind whipping through his hair. Sarah blinked, confused. "What is this? Why are you here?" she asked. He walked toward her slowly, the noise fading behind him. "Because yesterday, you reminded me what it means to be human," he said, his voice steady but soft. He handed her an envelope. "This isn't charity," he continued. "It's gratitude. You gave when you had nothing. Let me give back." Inside the envelope was a job offer at his company, a letter promising full benefits, and a deed to a modest house nearby. Sarah stared at it, speechless. "I can't accept this," she whispered. James shook his head. "You already earned it. You saved me from a kind of poverty money can't fix." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at Noah, who was watching wide-eyed, holding her hand tightly. "Mom, is he an angel?" the boy asked. Sarah laughed through her tears. "Maybe," she said softly. James smiled for the first time in years. "No, kid," he said, crouching to meet Noah's gaze. "Your mom is." As the helicopter lifted off, Sarah stood there, holding the papers to her chest, the morning sun breaking through the clouds. The air smelled like rain and second chances. For the first time in a long time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, help wasn't too expensive after all. The next morning, the quiet of dawn was broken by a deafening roar that sent the birds scattering across the pale sky. Sarah jumped out of bed, her heart racing, thinking it must be an accident or some emergency nearby. The sound grew louder until she realized it was coming from above. She rushed to the window and froze. A helicopter was descending right outside their small, run-down yard, sending dust and leaves swirling like a storm. Noah woke up crying, clutching her arm in fear. "Mom, what's happening?" he asked, his voice trembling. Sarah held him close, whispering that everything was fine, even though she wasn't sure herself. She grabbed a sweater and hurried outside, shielding Noah's eyes from the wind that whipped around them. The neighbors peeked out from their doors and windows, stunned by the sight. When the blade slowed and the noise faded, a man stepped out, his coat fluttering, his face calm yet determined. It took Sarah a moment to recognize him as the same man from the Café Tilde copyright, the stranger whose coffee she had paid for with her last few dollars. But now, he looked different. He wasn't tired or lost. He carried himself with quiet authority. Sarah blinked in disbelief. "You?" she whispered. "What are you doing here?" The man smiled faintly, walking toward her. "Miss," he began, his voice steady, "I'm sorry for showing up like this, but I had to see you again. My name is James Carter. I'm the CEO of a company called Carter Industries." Sarah frowned, confused, clutching Noah's hand tighter. "CEO? I don't understand a broken bar. Why would someone like you come here?" He took a deep breath, looking around at the small, weathered house and the cracked paint on the porch railings. "Because yesterday, you did something no one else has done for me in a long time. You showed kindness without expecting anything in return." Sarah shook her head, embarrassed. "It was just a coffee," she said softly. "You don't owe me anything." But James smiled sadly. "That's where you're wrong. You gave me more than coffee. You gave me faith. You see, I wasn't in that Café Tilde copyright by accident. I've spent years surrounded by people who only smile when they need something, who only help when it benefits them. I lost faith in people, broken bar in humanity. So I went out that morning, alone, pretending to be just another man. I wanted to see if kindness still existed. And when my card failed, everyone turned away. Everyone except you." Sarah felt her throat tighten, unsure what to say. The neighbors were still watching, whispering among themselves. Noah peeked up at the man curiously. "Mom, is he a movie star?" he asked innocently, making James laugh for the first time in years. He crouched down to meet Noah's eyes. "No, buddy, just someone who was lucky enough to meet your mom." Then he stood, reaching into his coat and pulling out an envelope. "This is for you," he said, holding it out. Sarah hesitated, her hands trembling as she took it. The paper felt heavy, more than just ink and words. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the contents, then widening in disbelief. Inside was an official job offer from his company, with a salary higher than anything she had ever dreamed of. There was also a deed to a modest house, not luxurious, but beautiful and secure, a place she and Noah could finally call home. And tucked inside, folded neatly, was a handwritten note. Her eyes filled with tears as she read the words, for the kindness you didn't know would save me." She looked up at James, her voice shaking. "Why me? There are so many people out there who need help more than I do." He stepped closer, his tone gentle. "Because you reminded me what love looks like when it costs everything. You gave when you had nothing. That kind of heart deserves a chance to rest." Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. She covered her mouth, trying to keep from sobbing. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. James smiled. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll take it, not for me, but for him." He nodded toward Noah, who was now clutching the edge of her sweater, looking up at both of them with wide, curious eyes. Sarah knelt beside her son, hugging him tightly. For years, she had prayed for a miracle, even on nights when she had lost faith in her own prayers. Now, standing in her small yard with the morning light breaking through the clouds, she realized that miracles sometimes came disguised as ordinary moments. A coffee shared, a stranger helped, a kindness returned. James looked around one last time, his expression soft but full of something deeper: respect, maybe even admiration. "You know," he said quietly, "people spend their whole lives chasing money and success. I thought I had everything, but I was wrong. Yesterday, I met someone who had almost nothing and still managed to give. That's real wealth." Sarah lowered her eyes, overwhelmed. "You're giving me too much," she murmured. "You deserve it," he said simply. "And maybe, in helping you, I can finally find my own peace." The sound of the helicopter blades started again, sending the grass swaying. Sarah looked at him, words caught in her throat. "Thank you," she finally managed to say, her voice breaking. James nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "Don't thank me. You earned this long before I showed up." He turned to Noah and said, "Take care of your mom, kiddo. She's one of the strongest people I've ever met." Noah grinned and gave a shy wave. James walked back toward the helicopter, his coat catching the wind. As the machine lifted off, Sarah and Noah stood together, watching it disappear into the brightening sky. The morning air was filled with the scent of rain and fresh earth, the kind of air that feels new, like the start of something better. Sarah clutched the envelope to her chest, her heart pounding with disbelief and gratitude. She looked down at her son, who was smiling up at her, his eyes sparkling. "Mom," he said, "did our life just change?" She laughed through her tears and kissed his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered. "I think it finally did." They stood there for a long time, the sound of the helicopter fading into silence. Sarah glanced at the worn house behind them, at the leaky roof, the creaking door, and felt something shift inside her. For years, she had carried the weight of survival, never daring to hope too much. Now, for the first time, she allowed herself to dream. She imagined painting the walls of their new home, planting flowers in the yard, cooking dinner without worrying if there'd be enough for tomorrow. She thought about James, the stranger who had become an unexpected blessing, and prayed that wherever he went, he would find the same peace he had given her. Because in the end, it wasn't just about money or gifts. It was about faith, the quiet, unspoken kind that lives in small acts of love. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah took Noah's hand, her voice steady. "Come on, baby," she said softly. "We've got a new life to begin." And together, they walked back toward the house, the morning light wrapping them in its gentle warmth, as if the whole world had decided to give them one more chance.